You see, I realized this fall that most of my life as a Christian, which has been probably 40 years, I believe I accepted Christ when I was around 10. And I have trusted him for my salvation. Hands down, no problem. And I am good at following him, right? Tell me what to do and I'll do it. I like to obey most of the time. Don't ask Ron, maybe. But if you tell me to do something, more than likely, I'll do it. But I realized that I didn't have a very good relationship with the Good Shepherd. Of really just having him in my life and really just learning how to have a relationship with him. How many of you have someone in your life that you do things for a lot, but you maybe don't spend a lot of time in a relationship with them? Relationships take time. They take just hanging out sometimes. Do you have some friends who you just hang out with and you just enjoy their company? And I realized that maybe Jesus was inviting me to just enjoy his company. To not worry about what I'm doing so much, but just to get to know him. And as I thought, well, who is he? Who is he? And he kept on bringing me back to John chapter 10. I am the Good Shepherd. And so I want to just give you a quick synopsis of all the different character qualities of Jesus in John chapter 10. He will lead you the right way. That's who he is as the shepherd. Jesus knows us intimately. He knows us by name. You know, very few people may call you by your name. And I know maybe as the youngest, I didn't hear my name a whole lot. Right? It was just kind of, hey, you. No, not really. But we kind of don't really say names very often anymore. And so when someone says my name, it's almost an endearment because I think we just talk to each other a lot. But to think that Jesus knows you intimately, he knows your name. He knows you individually. And he not only knows you by name, but he calls you by name. You see, when a friend says to me, Brenda, or if I get a text message and it says, thank you, Brenda, there's something about that extra, thank you, Brenda, that just does a little bit in my heart. It says somehow that they see you. They know you by name. Jesus goes out before us. He's a protector. Now, the group that traveled with me to India, Deb's not here, Jean isn't, but I told them straight out, like, I'm sorry, but I'm kind of always going to make sure we're all together. It's kind of the teacher in me. Wherever I go, I'm kind of the person who's herding the crowd along, making sure we've got everyone in the place where they're supposed to be, making sure that everyone's safe. And so I kind of would go out before them, this is the way we go, but then I'd kind of hang back, didn't I, Deb, and make sure that I was behind everyone, making sure that except that one time we were going through that security line, I wanted to make sure I got on the other side. But Jesus goes out before us. He is tender and he is involved with you. Jesus is tender. And maybe there are people in your life who aren't very tender. But as I'm getting to know Jesus, the Good Shepherd, I'm learning that he is tender with me. Sometimes we can think about God in a more emotionally disconnected way, right? He's big, he's our creator, he's over us. And God may not feel very intimate, but Jesus, our Good Shepherd, wants intimacy with us. He gives his followers trust and confidence. You see, you have to really trust somebody to follow them. You have to really trust somebody to be able to know that they're going to take care of your needs. Every day that we get up and we trust something about ourselves with another person, that shows that we have confidence in them. Otherwise, we kind of take care of ourselves. Human nature is just kind of that way. It feels vulnerable to let someone else take care of us. So when we let Jesus take care of us, it shows that he is trustworthy. Jesus is the way to salvation. He is the only way, the only gate that you can go through to get to salvation. He is the only way. And he came so that we can have life. Not only eternal life, but to have an abundant life here on this earth. And that's what we're going to learn more about today. An abundant life that is not about doing, but is about purely just being with him and learning how much we need to be in him before we ever follow him. He lays down his life for his sheep. He is sacrificial. You see, and as a shepherd owns the sheep. In fact, in John chapter 10, the verses we didn't read in between John chapter verse 10 and 14, it talks about the owner of the sheep. The owner is going to make sure that the sheep are okay, because the hired hand is not going to pay attention. Have any of you been to maybe a store or a restaurant where the people working really don't care about the service? Have any of you been to an institution like that? And you kind of know that they really don't have any stock in the ownership. Why? Because otherwise they would be taking care of you better. You see, someone who is manager over someone else cares for them. I've been married to someone who takes care of animals. Ron has raised, he's been a dairyman. We've raised sheep, we've raised goats, we've raised chickens, we've raised dogs. Cats we don't raise, they just kind of come naturally. We don't. We are not cat people. But I have watched my husband as a good shepherd, a good husbandman to whichever creature he's caring for. He knows them actually by name. He knows their quirks, he knows what they need, he knows what time they need to be fed, and he hurries home from something just to feed them if it's past time. He knows exactly when is the best time to take care of all of the other needs, the trimming of the hooves and all the different things that I never knew went into taking care of creatures, but he knows it all. He knows so much about animals because he owns them and he cares for them. And Jesus is the same way with us. He purchased us with his blood, and he cares for us so intimately. That is who the Good Shepherd is. So, I wonder, there we go, I wonder if I can get the clicker to work. As I think about the Good Shepherd, and as I think about this little journey that we're going to go on with him, the thing that I found is that in every action that Jesus presents us, there's a reaction from us. You see, Jesus, the Good Shepherd, has created everything about himself that is trustworthy. And the question that he leaves us with is, do we trust him? See, he is completely trustworthy. He is completely trustworthy. And this has been the challenge that God has challenged me with this past year. Brenda, you trust me for your salvation. So do you trust me about the deepest things in your heart? Do you trust me about the things in your daily life? Do you trust me with things that seem to be too big, that are out of your control? Do you trust me? And I've had to answer honestly. Most days I probably don't. Most days I probably try to figure things out in order to make sure that if the worst happens, then I'm prepared. Are any of you like that? Do any of you kind of go through your mind what's going to happen next? Well, if this happens, then at least I'll do this. If this happens, I'm going to do this. Ron, sometimes when I verbalize those things, he'll say, Brenda, just stop. Because I've got plan X, Y, and Z done already. 26, every letter of the alphabet, I've got a plan. And yet Jesus is just asking me, if you can trust me for your eternal life, can you not trust me in your daily activities? Can you not trust me with the things of your heart? And I want to ask that of you today. Can you trust the character of the Good Shepherd? When we do, we find something out. We find that he tells us that we shall not want. This is a declaration. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. And I love the idea of thinking about God's provision. I know that every single one of you sitting here in the pews knows that Jesus is going to provide for you. I know that because I'm there with you. I really know that Jesus is going to provide for me. That's head knowledge. But how many times in my heart do I really lean into the fact that he is really going to meet my needs? And not just meet my needs, but just as Greg challenged us with already this morning, would we dare to even consider that he might meet our needs above and beyond? Philippians 4:19 is a verse that became very prominent to me several years ago when I was teaching Bible school. Philippians 4:19 says, "May God supply all of your needs according to your glorious riches in Christ Jesus." And I was teaching Bible school here, and it was when we were doing the stations, and that was my verse all week long. And it was the summer right before I started teaching. And that was a big step for me because I had been a stay-at-home mom for over a decade. And I had this feeling in my gut that I was really fearful because my younger two kids were going to be taken care of by someone other than myself. And it wasn't that I thought someone couldn't do it. It was just that I had a lot of worries. Would they turn out okay? Were they going to resent me because I wasn't there day in and day out like I was for the older ones? And God hit me with this verse again that I've been teaching to little kids all week long. God's going to supply your needs. God will take care of your needs. Why? Because his verse says so. And God whispered to me, "Brenda, will you trust me that I'm going to take care of your kids?" And I had to step out of the boat and believe him and say, I guess you will. And do you know what? He has. The last one just left the house, and they're all healthy, responsible adults. He did that, not me. But how many times do we say, yeah, God will provide, and yet we are holding on to the strings of what we really are allowing God to provide? You see, because this is what God has been showing me about a relationship with Good Shepherd. God desires it to be a reciprocal relationship. Reciprocal relationship. It means that it's two ways. It means that it's God interacting with us and us interacting with him. It's Jesus saying, I'm going to provide your needs, and it's us saying, yes, I'll receive what you want to give me. And in this passage, in the verse about him supplying our needs, there's actually a dual meaning. It's not just about allowing him to take care of our needs, but it's being content with his provision. Being content with his provision. This is something that, again, I'm challenged by. How many of you are content with God's provision? How many of you, especially when God doesn't answer perhaps a prayer that you've been praying, and God's provision is wait, or God's provision is, I'm taking care of it, you just can't see it. And you're standing there saying, God's really not going to provide. How many of you are not content with God's provision? One thing that challenges me when I go to other environments like India or the DR or Mexico, which are the places that I've been outside the United States, is that people are content with their place in life. That's something I really brought away from India this time. You know, especially with the government that seems kind of in turmoil right now and things might seem uncertain. And when you're in other countries where, from our perspective, their governments might be different than ours, maybe less organized or something. And God really showed me this time that they have a quality of life. God truly meets their needs. And they go about their life not looking for what's next. They're content with their life and their Lord. And I'm challenged by that. I'm always looking for what's next. Right? You finish one stage and you look forward to what's next. You finish a project and you figure, what's next? Where are we going, Lord? What do you want me to do? And he said, do you realize, if it were just you and me, Brenda, would you be okay with that? If you did nothing for me? If it was just us in a pasture and me taking care of your needs, would you be happy with that? We have dogs, and we're dog people. And the thing I've learned about dogs is that they completely adore their master. Would you agree? Those of you who have dogs? They completely adore their master. Their life rises and falls over our attention that we give them. And sometimes I wonder, is that what God invites us to? Does he invite that our day rises and falls on being in his presence? And not in his presence in like worship where we're on the floor and having music blaring, but I truly mean in his presence where he is fully providing for us, and it's a reciprocal relationship of him providing for us and us receiving what he's giving us with contentment. This is a challenge, but it's the truth. God provides abundantly for us. God provides abundantly for us. I was reading a book in preparation for this sermon by Philip Yancey. It's called A Trilogy of a Shepherd. And there was one quote in there, and he was saying in relation to this statement of, I shall not want. If we were to say it in another term, he would say, I'm completely satisfied with my manager. I'm completely satisfied with my manager. It means that this shepherd who takes care of me, I'm completely satisfied with him. He provides everything that I need in abundance. You see, somehow I think as Christians, I know that this is how I have been socialized to believe, is that God will provide for my need, but nothing more. Just my need and nothing more. And what God is showing me more and more is that he truly wants to lead me out and make me rest in good pastures. Not just enough. And the idea with just enough is that when we see God provide for someone else in ways that feel abundant or feel lavish or lush, then somehow we feel like God must love them better than me. Have you ever wondered that? That God loves someone else better than he loves you? I have. I've somehow wondered, and I've somehow felt that God just tolerates me. That if I'm performing, if I'm doing, if I'm following him, and I'm following him the right way, then somehow he's satisfied with me. But if I'm not somehow producing or doing, then he really doesn't pay attention to me. And yet here in the beginning of Psalm 23, he says, the Lord is my shepherd. He knows me by name. He's taking care of me. And he knows what I need. And he's providing for it. And not just in the way of just enough. You see, one thing I've learned is that a love relationship, especially from parent to child, usually is going above and beyond. In fact, I think our Sunday school lesson is about this today. I think our Sunday school lesson is about when you ask for something, does God give you not quite enough? Or does he give you enough and then abundantly more? And it's not always in financial needs. See, we tend to look at the financial provision and not really asking and trusting God for our emotional provision or our relational provision or our spiritual provision. God desires us to think that he will provide for us abundantly, immeasurably more than we can ask or imagine. Because it's a reciprocal relationship. He wants to give. So this is my question. I had to ask myself, do we receive from him? If he's providing abundantly, do we receive from him? Have you ever been given a gift but you didn't really receive it? Maybe because it wasn't what you wanted. Has God ever given you something you didn't want? Be honest. Was there ever that gift you asked for? Even as a little kid, you asked for something and you got something else? Has God ever given you something that you didn't really want? And yet that was what God gave you. In receiving it, it's a reciprocal relationship. Or do you let it just sit there and say, you're not providing for my needs? This is the other part about a reciprocal relationship with someone who's providing for your needs, is not only the response of receiving, but the action of asking. Asking. Again, as a parent, I think about this reciprocal relationship. If I know what my children need, I hope that in all efforts I'm going to do whatever I need to do to provide it for them within limits. But especially for their emotional needs or for their spiritual needs, I'm going to try to meet those needs. But are there ever times when a child asks you for something? And how many of you as parents withheld providing what they asked for? And I just wonder, throughout the New Testament, in fact, I've been reading in the book of John in my own personal study, and again and again and again, Jesus says, ask. He says, ask, and you'll be given. And yet, how many times do we not really ask? We just assume that God's going to provide. And yet, when he doesn't provide, we kind of get upset with him. God, you knew what I needed, and you didn't give it. And I just wonder how many times is he there just like Greg talked about today? Did you ask? And so my question is, do we ask Jesus for our needs? Do you ask the Good Shepherd for your needs? Asking is hard. Would all of you agree? And do any of you think asking is hard? Because it's a place of vulnerability. And we don't like to be vulnerable. Asking somehow outs us as being needy. And we don't want to be needy. I don't want to be emotionally needy. I don't want to be spiritually needy. I don't want to be physically needy. So when we have to ask for something, it says that I have a need, and somehow I can't meet it on my own. And yet that is really what Jesus, the Good Shepherd, asks us to do. He wants reciprocity. He wants a relationship with him that says, you ask and I'm going to provide. And I'm going to give and I want you to receive. I will meet all of your needs. And for Jesus, there's no greater satisfaction than seeing his sheep well-fed, contented, safe, and flourishing under his care. Because that's the goal of a shepherd. Philip Yancey, the author of this book, The Shepherd Trilogy, was a shepherd in Eastern Africa for a long time. And so all of his analogies, all of his truths are truly about being a shepherd. And he said, for a shepherd, there's no greater satisfaction than seeing his sheep well-fed, contented, safe, and flourishing under his care. And I invite you to consider that Jesus wants that for us too. That he wants us to be well-fed, spiritually, emotionally, relationally, physically. He wants us contented. He wants us to be content with what he's given us, with what he's doing in our life. He wants us to be content with him. He wants us safe. The thing about the Good Shepherd in John chapter 10 is this whole thing of safety. Jesus is saying all throughout that whole passage that there are these thieves and robbers that are trying to come in and steal and destroy. And Jesus is the Good Shepherd right there, taking care of us, keeping us safe. I want you to know that when we trust Jesus with all these areas of our lives, that we can trust him with emotional safety, physical safety, spiritual safety. He wants us flourishing under his care. And yet how many of us live like we're lacking emotionally, physically? right? The grass is always greener on the other side. So this is my challenge to us. Do we ask him for our needs? It's my challenge to myself. I'm actually starting to do this more. In my quiet time, I'm starting to make a practice of asking daily what I need. I fail at it. Probably out of 10 times, I do it 2. Why? Because I'm just too busy, right? Too busy doing other stuff to really think about my needs for the day and asking Jesus, Lord, will you meet my needs? And do we receive what he provides? The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. He wants us to receive and he wants us to ask. He wants us to be fully contented, well-fed, safe, and flourishing under his care. Because this is the first place he takes us. So in Psalm 23, it's a progression of verbs. But the verb only starts after the declaration of the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. And the first action he takes us on, the very first verb, is that he makes us lie down in green pastures. He makes us lie down in green pastures. So he's provided this pasture for us. He's given us everything that we need. And the first action with Jesus, the Good Shepherd, is a wrestling match. He makes us lie down in green green pastures. Now, there's 2 visual images that I think of when I always think of this verse. One of them is when Andrew was a toddler. He was 2, and I was pregnant, and I had 2 other kids, and I needed him to take a nap. And I wrestled with him for an hour, getting him to sleep. And every time that he would kind of go limp in my arms, what do you think happened? Any thoughts? Moms, you know what happened, right? He popped right up. You go to lay him down, and he popped right up. He did not want to miss a thing. He wanted to know. In fact, I think he was actually kind of being like how kids will be like straining to look up while you're trying to get them to rest. And I have to think about that all the time when I think about he makes us lie down in green pastures. Because really, all of us wrestle with God that way. He knows what we need. He knows what's ahead. He knows that we need rest. And yet, we wrestle against him. We wrestle against God in 3 ways. But before I go into those 3 ways, I want us to focus on where he wants us to lie down. He wants us to lie down in this place of God. When I was a little girl, I grew up in Shipshawana. When I would walk home from school, we would walk along what is now Middlebury Street to Morton Street, right at the corner where Ryan and Laura live. And across the street from Ryan and Laura's house is a home that when I was little had lush grass, and I'm pretty sure it still does. It probably had the only sprinkling system in the whole town, and it was owned by the bank president. And my friend and I, when we would walk home, especially in spring, like early May, when the grass is really the greenest, we would take our sandals off and we'd walk in that grass. And I know a couple times this is what we did. The garage in that house is in the basement, and so there's a back alley around the back, and you drive the car into the basement. There's a water fountain. There's a retaining wall and a water fountain there. And a couple times we kind of looked both ways, and we jumped down behind that wall and laid in the grass, and made like snow angels, only on the grass. Right? Any of you guys ever make snow angels? And when I think about God making us lie down in green pastures, that picture always comes to mind. You see, most of you are farmers, and I know that you would not put your cattle out into a field where there is nothing but dry stubble. You wouldn't do it. I know that every single one of you would make sure that your cattle, whatever it is that you were raising, had a lush field. And in fact, for shepherds, they have to look really, really hard for a lush field because most of the foliage that's growing is in rocks and crevices crevices if the sheep are being herded, especially in Israel. So shepherds intentionally create pastures where there's lush foliage for them to eat from. It takes intention. And God is being intentional about every single one of us. That the place that he wants us to lie down and stop wrestling is a good place. But if you're like me, sometimes you might say, well, God, you have not given me the good place that I really was looking for, that I was expecting. So I'm not sure that I can really trust you. So I'm going to lay down on my terms. I'm going to rest on my terms. I will follow you. I will do what you want me to do. But this thing of truly trusting you to lie down, again, the whole act of lying down is another position of vulnerability. So I want to ask you, what are the ways that you wrestle in allowing God to make you rest? There's 3 ways that I found from these 2 passages, John chapter 10, that we wrestle with God. The first one is distraction. The first one is distraction, just like my toddler. I don't want to miss anything. I don't want to go to sleep. I'm going to miss something. Are any of you that way? God, I really don't want to rest in the place that you're asking me not to do anything, to just spend time with you, to maybe not be producing anything as far as works go, or as far as like just being active. I have a hard time, God, because I might miss out. They might do something without me. Someone might forget that I'm here. If it's just you and me, Jesus, I don't know that that's enough. And yet, God says, the Good Shepherd says, I want you to lay down. I want you to rest. And that requires complete surrender. And I just wonder, do you wrestle with distraction? Do any of you spend time scrolling through on your phone? For those of you who have phones and internet and social media. Do you spend time wondering what God is wanting you to do in the next season of your life? Are you spending time, especially some of you who are maybe in the later seasons of your lives, thinking, well, God can't use me. There's nothing I can really do. Could we really even entertain the fact that Jesus truly just wants a reciprocal relationship with us? Are we distracted, thinking that there's something we are missing if we truly are just resting in a relationship with Jesus Christ? And then there's deception. Deception. You see, in John chapter 10, the Good Shepherd says that there are these thieves and the robbers that are trying to come in and steal and destroy. And you see that the thief and the robber is the enemy of God. He's the adversary. And the number one tactic of the enemy is deception. He'll take something that is true and just spin it just enough. And the first act of deception we saw in Genesis. We saw it there in the beautiful lush garden, right? God provided everything for Adam and Eve. He gave them everything that they needed. He even provided relationship with himself. He walked among them and he talked with them. And here comes the serpent. Only did you know that the serpent, the word for serpent in Genesis, is not this slithering, really gross thing that we think we shy away from. It actually was meaning something very shiny, an enchanter. And we know that when we're enchanted by something, we're fascinated by it. It looks really good. So here comes this shiny, glittering creature and introduces the very first deception. Did God really say that? And I just wonder, are you distracted in resting with God because of deception that he's giving you? Is there a lie that he has given you in your life that you're believing? Is there a lie about Christianity or about even theology, or a lie about your personhood that you have grabbed hold of that makes you not really trust Jesus? Trust yourself to rest in him. Deception. which is disposition. The whole line down. Are you like a stubborn toddler? Do you wrestle and push against resting in Him? Do you want your own way? Anyone? Am I the only one? I think there's some deception going on. I can be stubborn. One thing I do know about human nature is I don't think any one of us like to be told what to do. Do any of you like to be told what to do? I'm sure when I was a child, I did not want to be told that I needed a nap. And sometimes I think that I probably don't want to be told from God that I just need to just rest. Just calm down. Do nothing. Just be satisfied with me. Because the lie tells me that I have to be doing something, that I have to be somehow achieving something, that I have to somehow earn the approval of someone else in order to somehow receive God's favor. That He Himself is not enough. I wrestle against that. I wonder if you wrestle against that too. You see, God wants us to respond with a place of surrender. And surrendering, I've got to be honest with you, it's a little bit scary, isn't it? I wonder if you are like me, you can easily surrender your life to God. That sounds good. I can give God my life for eternal salvation. You betcha, 100%. Never question that commitment. But surrendering to Him daily, that's a little bit hard. It feels really vulnerable. It feels kind of needy. I don't like to ask. I want Him just to assume that He knows what I need and magically have it show up every day. And when it doesn't, I sometimes wonder, can I really trust Him? And yet His Word says that I can. His Word says that He's the Good Shepherd. His Word says that we can trust Him. And His Word says that even before He is going to lead us anywhere, before He's even going to restore our soul, before He's going to lead us in paths of righteousness or take us through the valley of the shadow of death, He wants us to just be in relationship with Him, in a place of contentment, in a place of green pastures. But it requires a response from us that is vulnerable. And so I just wonder for all of us today, what qualities of the Good Shepherd do you need Jesus to be to you right now? What qualities of the Good Shepherd do you need Him to be in your life right now? And another question is, what are you wrestling with God? What are you wrestling with? Is it a trust issue? Is it a phone call you're waiting for that you hope is not going to be the worst news? Is it the faith of one of your children? Is it just yourself? Do any of you ever wrestle with God with yourself? I think I have most of my life. Lord, just change me. Only you could change me, then maybe everything would be okay. Or maybe it's just a question of surrender. What do you need to surrender to Him? Is it distraction? Is it deception? Is it your disposition? There's a commercial that I know several of you will remember, and I'll finish with this, plus a little poem that was very meaningful to me actually just this week as I was preparing. There used to be a Nestea iced tea commercial. Does anyone remember Nestea iced tea on TV? And there was a commercial with something called the Nestea plunge. And I remember one particular commercial where the dad came home from work and he kind of walked with his briefcase and he'd walk through the house and he came through the front door and came through the back door and went up to the pool in the back and fell back work clothes on. Does anyone remember that commercial? And I often think about surrendering to Jesus like that. If you're of the younger generation, I think of the Tom Petty song called Free Falling. It's this idea of complete surrender to Jesus, not just with our life, but with our daily ins and outs. It's a very vulnerable place. But as I think about surrendering to Jesus, this little poem, I think, is something that he is saying to us, and this is from the devotional called Streams in the Desert. Dear restless heart, be still. Don't fret and worry so. God has 1,000 ways his love and help to show. Just trust and trust and trust until his will you know. Dear restless heart, be still. For peace is God's own smile. His love can every wrong and sorrow reconcile. So just love and love and love and calmly wait a while. Dear restless heart, be brave. Don't moan and sorrow so. He has meaning kindly in the chilly winds that blow. So just hope, hope, and hope until you braver grow. Dear restless heart, recline upon his breast this hour. His grace is strength and life. His love is bloom and flower. So just rest, and rest within his tender power. Dear restless heart, be still. Don't struggle to be free. God's life is in your life. From him you may not flee. So just pray and pray and pray till you have faith to